I used to think real conflicts were loud. Shouting, slamming doors, police lights, broken fences. Then I moved into a quiet neighborhood with identical mailboxes, identical lawns, and identical smiles. That's where I learned something important. The most vicious wars are fought with clipboards, passive-aggressive notes, and people who believe rules are a personality trait. Out here, nobody throws punches. They throw complaints. They don't scream. They document. And when someone finally snaps, it's never in a dramatic way. It's with a sprinkler system, a receipt, or a very carefully chosen shade of paint. These are stories about people who thought they were enforcing order and accidentally started campaigns they couldn't win. Let me start with the man who taught me that some people don't want peace. They want symmetry. When I first moved in, my neighbor Carl introduced himself by pointing at my lawn. Not shaking my hand. Not asking my name. Just pointing, like a disappointed museum guide. "You'll want to keep that trimmed," he said. "The association recommends 2¼ inches." I laughed, because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He actually pulled a small yellow measuring tape from his pocket and demonstrated on his own grass, like a magician revealing a trick. For the first few weeks, he would wave at me every morning while he mowed in perfect, ruler-straight lines. Then he started standing at the edge of our shared boundary, hands on hips, staring at my yard like it had personally offended him. One evening, I came home late and saw him kneeling near the fence, snipping something with tiny scissors. "Everything okay?" I asked. He jumped like I'd caught him stealing. "Your clover," he said, straightening up. It was encroaching. On what? On the concept of order. That's when I realized this wasn't about grass. This was about control. Carl needed the world to look a certain way, and my yard was an unsolved problem in his otherwise solved life. A week later, I checked my security camera and saw him at 2 in the morning, trimming one single patch near the fence with surgical focus. He even brought a flashlight. So I did what any reasonable adult would do. I went to the garden store and bought a bag labeled Wildflower Mix, Pollinator Paradise. The cashier told me it was low maintenance and aggressively enthusiastic. That sounded perfect. I waited until Carl left for a 2-week vacation. The morning after he drove away, I walked into his yard with a coffee and a smile and scattered those seeds like I was blessing a battlefield. I even whistled. 2 weeks later, his lawn came back first. At first, he just stood there, staring. Where there had been military green precision, there was now chaos. Purple, yellow, red. Flowers he couldn't name. Bees he couldn't negotiate with. Butterflies that did not respect property lines. He knocked on my door that evening, holding one sad little ruler. "This is unacceptable," he said. I looked past him at what used to be his lawn and said, "You're right. It's beautiful." He started talking about fines, regulations, the spirit of the neighborhood. I started talking about pollinators and biodiversity. We both knew the real argument was simpler. He wanted his illusion of control back. The flowers stayed. The bees stayed. The butterflies definitely stayed. Carl bought earplugs so he wouldn't hear them. I bought a small bench so I could sit and enjoy them. We haven't spoken since, but sometimes I catch him standing at the window, measuring the impossible. Here's the pattern nobody wants to admit. People who can't control their own lives start controlling inches of yours. It's never about the lawn, the noise, or the rules. It's about the quiet panic of realizing the world doesn't obey. So they shrink their battlefield until it fits inside a clipboard. And if you challenge that, you're not just breaking a rule. You're breaking their last illusion of order. Across the street from my friend's place lives a man named Dennis who believes public parking is a personal insult. The first time I parked in front of his house, he left a note on my windshield. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was instructional. "Please respect neighborhood harmony by choosing a different spot." I ignored it, because the street is public and my car is not a guest in his imagination. The next morning, I found 2 bright orange traffic cones guarding the space like nervous soldiers. I moved them. I parked. The cones came back the next day. Then the day after that. It became a ritual. He'd place them carefully. I'd stack them neatly on his lawn and park anyway. Eventually, he escalated. He bought a boat. Not a nice one. A sun-faded, dented, clearly unloved boat on a trailer that looked like it had lost a war. He parked it in his spot and left it there. Permanently. 3 years passed. The boat never moved. The tires slowly melted into the asphalt. The city put warnings on it. Then tickets. Then more tickets. Dennis paid them all. Not because he wanted the boat. because he wanted to win. One afternoon, I saw him sitting in a lawn chair, staring at that boat like a general surveying a useless fortress. "Nice vessel," I said. "It's strategic," he replied. That's when I had an idea that felt both petty and educational. I started inviting friends over. A lot. And they all parked everywhere else on the street. Perfectly legally. The only open space left, every weekend, was right in front of Dennis's house, blocked by his own decaying monument to spite. People started asking him if he was selling the boat. He'd say no. Someone asked if he was fixing it up. He said it was not about that. One day, a city inspector showed up and explained that the fines were now more than the boat was worth. Dennis argued. The inspector shrugged. A week later, the boat was gone. The next morning, I parked in front of his house again. No cones. No note. Just Dennis behind the curtain, watching like a man who had finally realized he'd spent 3 years defending an empty idea. The first thing you notice about Marlene is the clipboard. The second thing is that she treats it like a badge. She's the kind of person who says, "I don't make the rules," with the exact tone of someone who absolutely would if given the chance. She lived 3 houses down and had recently appointed herself the unofficial ambassador of the HOA, which mostly meant she walked around taking pictures of things that made her unhappy. One Tuesday, I got an email with 3 attachments. All of them were photos of my trash cans. Each one had a timestamp. Each one had a red circle drawn around the same crime. My bins were visible from the street for 2 hours after pickup. Marlene knocked on my door later that day, smiling like a dentist about to explain consequences. "I just wanted to make sure you saw the notice," she said. "It's about keeping standards." "I saw it," I said. The cans were still warm. She didn't laugh. People like Marlene never laugh. They catalog. So I started paying attention to her house. Not in a creepy way. In a compliance way. The sidewalk in front of her place was always spotless, except for one thing. Her maple tree. Every morning, a few leaves would fall and land on the concrete like tiny, biodegradable criminals. The HOA rules had a line about maintaining clear and safe walkways. The next day, I took a photo, timestamped it, sent it to the HOA. The day after that, I did it again, and again, and again, always polite, always factual, always with the subject line, just maintaining standards. After a week, Marlene knocked on my door, clipboard tucked under her arm like a wounded bird. "This is harassment," she said. "No," I replied. "This is documentation." By week 2, she'd hired a landscaping crew. They came in the morning and in the afternoon. The leaves still fell. Gravity doesn't respect authority. By week 3, she stopped waving when she walked past my house. By week 4, the HOA quietly updated their email filters. My trash can still go out. Sometimes they're visible for an hour. Sometimes 2. Marlene doesn't send photos anymore. But her sidewalk has never been cleaner. And every time I see a single leaf drift down, I think about how expensive it is to declare war on nature with a clipboard. Some people collect stamps. Some collect coins. Some collect violations. The danger isn't the rules themselves. It's what happens when enforcement becomes someone's personality. At that point, you're not maintaining order. You're hunting control in small, harmless places because it's safer than admitting the world doesn't actually need your permission. My friend Lisa lives in a neighborhood where the houses are different shapes, but the same shade of boring. Beige, tan, and something the HOA calls desert fog, which is just beige that went to college. Lisa made one mistake. She painted her front door deep blue. Not neon. Not wild. Just a calm, confident blue. 3 days later, she got a letter. Unapproved exterior modification. Please return door to compliant color within 14 days. She went to the HOA meeting and asked, why? The president, a man who looked like he'd been born in a committee room, said, "It disrupts visual harmony." "What harmony?" she asked. "Everything looks like unbuttered toast." They didn't laugh. Committees never laugh either. So she painted it back. Beige. Sad beige. The kind of beige that looks tired even in sunlight. The HOA was satisfied. Case closed. Except Lisa noticed something in the rules. They had pages about siding. Pages about fences. Pages about mailboxes. But doors? Just one sentence. Must not be offensive. No color list. No palette. Just vibes. 2 weeks later, she painted the door again. This time, it wasn't just blue. It was a galaxy. Deep purples, stars, a faint nebula curling near the handle. It looked like you could knock and fall into space. The HOA lost their minds. Emails, meetings, emergency discussions about precedent. You can't do this, the president said. Show me where it says I can't, Lisa replied. They couldn't. They tried to argue that space itself was, somehow, offensive. They suggested it lowered property values. Someone said it felt aggressive. Meanwhile, people started taking pictures in front of her door. Kids loved it. A delivery driver asked if it was a mural. The HOA sent a final letter. Please reconsider for the good of the community. Lisa framed it and hung it inside, right next to the door. The door stayed. The rules stayed. The silence at HOA meetings got louder. And every time someone walked past that row of identical beige houses and stopped at the one door that looked like it led somewhere else, you could see the real problem. It was never about harmony. It was about permission. The first time my neighbor Greg called the city on me, it was about my porch light. It's too bright, he said over the fence, squinting dramatically. It's like living next to a lighthouse. I checked the bulb. It was a normal bulb. Still, I swapped it for a dimmer one because I didn't feel like turning my evenings into a debate club. 2 days later, he called again. This time it was about my trash cans. Then about my hedge. Then about the angle of my security camera, which didn't even point at his yard. Every week, a different complaint. Every week, a different city employee knocking on my door, looking tired before I even opened it. One inspector finally said, "You know he calls about everyone, right?" That's when I realized Greg wasn't protecting the neighborhood. He was curating it, from my side of the fence. So I installed a motion-activated sprinkler system along the back fence. Officially, it was for raccoons. Unofficially, it was for curiosity. The first time Greg leaned over to check something, the sprinkler turned him into a very surprised fountain. "What the hell was that?" he shouted, dripping. "Raccoons," I said. Very aggressive. He started claiming he was just watering his bushes. The bushes were nowhere near my fence. The sprinkler disagreed. After the fourth soaking, he stopped leaning over. After the fifth, the city call stopped too. A month later, I saw him installing taller bushes. Privacy, it turns out, is much more comfortable when it's mutual. Across town, my cousin had a neighbor named Paula who treated the city hotline like a speed dial. If a blade of grass grew too tall, she reported it. If a car sat too long, she reported it. If someone sneezed near a property line, she probably reported that too. One morning, an inspector showed up and said her driveway might not be up to code. The word might did a lot of work in that sentence. Paula stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching like she was finally getting a season finale. The inspector measured. He frowned. He measured again. Then he walked next door and measured Paula's driveway too. Turns out, my cousin's driveway was fine. Paula's wasn't. It was off by just enough to matter. The city gave her 30 days to fix it. She tried to argue. She tried to blame. She tried to say she was just trying to keep standards high. Standards, unfortunately, don't negotiate. For the next month, her front yard turned into a construction site. Jackhammers, concrete trucks, dust. My cousin brought over coffee to the workers every morning and waved politely at Paula every afternoon. When it was finally done, Paula stopped calling the hotline. Not because she learned a lesson, but because she learned a cost. Living near other people teaches you a strange kind of math. Every rule someone enforces on you eventually comes back with interest. Every complaint adds a little weight to a system that doesn't care who started it. Most of these neighbors didn't wake up wanting a war. They woke up wanting things to stay the same. But the world doesn't stay still, and some people confuse order with meaning. So they start measuring, reporting, documenting, correcting. The funny part isn't that they lose. It's that they never notice what they're paying. Time, money, peace, all spent trying to win arguments no one was really having. Out here, the quiet neighborhoods don't stay quiet because everyone behaves. They stay quiet because, eventually, everyone learns the same lesson. You can control your own porch light. You can't control the whole street. And if you try, don't be surprised when the universe answers with a sprinkler system, a clipboard, or a very expensive driveway. When I bought my house, the real estate agent said, "The fence is old, but it's friendly old." I didn't know what that meant until my neighbor, Howard, introduced himself by tapping the fence with a knuckle like a doctor checking reflexes. "That's 3 inches on my side," he said. "It's been there for 20 years, I replied. "Yes," he said, "and now it's wrong." Howard didn't argue. He litigated. He printed maps. He quoted city code. He used the phrase, clear boundary, the way other people say good morning. A week later, he hired a surveyor. A man with a tripod and the patience of a monk showed up and spent an entire afternoon measuring our shared reality. Howard watched like it was a verdict. The verdict came. The fence was fine, perfectly placed, but something else wasn't. The surveyor cleared his throat and said, "Your garage, though, is about 3 feet over the line." Howard blinked, then blinked again, like his brain was buffering. "That's impossible," he said. "It's very possible," the surveyor replied. For the first time, Howard didn't have a document ready. He had silence. The city gave him options. None of them were cheap. None of them were fast. I could have pushed. I could have demanded he move it. Instead, I said, "Tell you what. Keep the garage. Mow my lawn for 5 years." He stared at me like I'd just proposed a duel with gardening tools. He's on year 4 now. He waves less. He mows very carefully. And every time he reaches the fence, he stops exactly at the line, like it finally means something different. Rules are comforting because they pretend the world is measurable. But the moment you bring out the ruler, you invite someone else to bring a bigger one. The irony is simple. People who obsess over boundaries often forget they have them too. And systems don't care who started the argument. They only care who fits inside the measurements. On my block, there was a woman named Teresa who believed aesthetics were a public service. When I painted my mailbox in a galaxy pattern, she treated it like a moral emergency. She filed a complaint, then another, then showed up at an HOA meeting with printed photos like evidence from a crime scene. "That mailbox lowers property values," she said. "It's a rectangle with stars on it," I replied. They made me repaint it. Brown, the official color of surrender. That's when I read the rules. Carefully. Mailboxes? Regulated. Siding? Regulated. Doors? One vague sentence about not offensive. No color list. No restrictions. Just vibes again. So I painted my front door the same galaxy. Bigger. Brighter. With a nebula that looked like it was swallowing the handle. Teresa stopped in front of my house, like she'd found a glitch in reality. "You can't do that," she said. "Show me where," I said. She tried. She failed. The HOA argued. The door stayed. People started taking selfies with it. Teresa stopped making eye contact with my house entirely. Sometimes rules don't stop rebellion. They just tell it where to move. My neighbor Victor hated noise in the abstract. He didn't care if it was loud. He cared if it wasn't his. When my kids played in the yard, he complained. When I fixed a shelf, he complained. When a bird existed too enthusiastically, I'm pretty sure he complained about that too. One Saturday, he decided to fight back. He set up huge speakers and blasted polka music at noon, pointed directly at our fence. My kids loved it. They started dancing. They made routines. They invited friends. By the end of the day, there was a small, joyful, extremely uncoordinated festival happening in my yard. Victor stared at them like he'd accidentally invented happiness. He turned the music off the next day. He hasn't turned it on since. We call it the accordion incident. He calls it a misunderstanding. Across the street, a man named Robert liked to pull into his driveway with his high beams on, directly into my living room. I asked him to dim them. He said, "It's just for a second." It was never just a second. So I bought a large decorative mirror and placed it in my front window at the perfect angle. The next time he pulled in, his own headlights bounced right back into his eyes. He stopped. He blinked. He adjusted. The next night, he turned his lights off before pulling in. Physics solved what politeness couldn't. The strange thing about neighborhoods is that nobody moves in planning to become a villain. They just start protecting tiny pieces of their comfort like it's a border. A parking spot. A color. A sound. A beam of light. But systems don't reward obsession. They multiply it. Every complaint invites a countercomplaint. Every rule creates a loophole. And every attempt to control someone else's life eventually turns into a lesson you didn't order. Most of these wars don't end with apologies. They end with silence. With people quietly adjusting their habits. With mirrors, sprinklers, paint, or a lawn mower crossing a line that suddenly means something new. And maybe that's the real balance. Not perfect order. Just enough shared embarrassment to keep everyone human.